Hey, how's it going? I just got back home from filming a video that was sort of impromptu with my friend Peter. We went and had lunch and we decided, we were talking about comments and things over the X-H2s and how the X-H2 has just been announced and some of the differences and which camera is for what. And so we decided to take a few minutes and actually go down to the beach and talk about the X-H2s and some of the comments that have been left in my videos, as well as DMs and comments that have been made on Instagram, just addressing anyone's comments to make sure that you get some of the right information, or at least from me and my perspective of this camera, because I feel like everyone has a different view of the camera. It's not for everybody. It is for some people. It is for me. And keep watching and you'll find out why. But I basically am doing sort of a follow-up, just so happened to be recorded on the exact date that I've had the camera for 2 months, and we talk about, yeah, some of the stuff such as build quality and things like that, stuff that you may already know, but addressing comments that have been left, so you can understand why this video was made, because these people have asked me about the build quality, about how it actually feels, about whether or not the paint chips off easily, things like that. So if you're more interested in usability, I have links down in the description for the 1 month review and how I go over some usability and button mappings and things like that, and the differences between the X-H2s and the X-T4, as well as my 1 week review where I talk about some of the things I didn't like right away, but then in my 1 month review found workarounds that work great for me. So anybody who's concerned about some of the same things that I was, there is hope. Anyway, I'm gonna go take this one for a walk, right? Because I've been gone for a little while, and then I'm gonna come back and start editing this footage so I can get it out tomorrow. And hopefully it's good, because it's a mix of footage that was shot by my friend Peter on a Canon R3 and my X-H2s, so put my skills to the test here. Anyway, here's the rest of it.
I've been on a vibe kinda hard to describe. I'm in between, I'm good and it's fine, but I'm tired of the grind. Then I come alive in the night to realize I'm in the middle of the time of my life. I'm never so packed for the stack, never lied on the rap.
Alright, so the first thing I want to address is the build quality. So this is the camera. I don't know how well you can see this or how well it comes across in video. I don't want to take the lens off because it is sandy out here. We're at the beach and I don't want to risk it. So if you take a look, I mean, the ergonomics are great. The camera is more or less the same. I have them both here with me today. Okay, here's the X-T4. If you take a close look, they're more or less identical. This one's obviously larger, but this one here and this one here, they have the same, like if you look at the, let's just take the X-T4 for example. If you look at this coating here, it's the same. You've got the same coating, you've got the same materials here on both cameras, the same exact screen on both cameras. The buttons are very similar. The menu and the arrow key buttons are exactly the same. However, on the X-H2s, the rest of the buttons are actually borrowed from the larger GFX camera, and the push is pretty tactile. It's nice. The screen, like I said, the screen's exactly the same. This I like a little bit better. So when you open these doors, not only do they stay open, but there's a little bit of resistance that helps keep them open or shut. These little flappy bits here are really annoying, and I feel like they're quite a bit cheaper than actually having the doors. So I don't really have any quorum or problems or anything with the build quality or the quality in general of the camera. There are several people that have stated that they don't like not having the clickable buttons as well as the dials, and I don't really think that's that big of a deal. On the X-T4, I didn't use them that much anyway, especially since I came from another system. I came from Canon, which didn't have that option, and these are a lot less flimsy. They feel a lot more, there's a lot more resistance to the turning, if you will, compared to the X-T4. That's a lot easier to turn and they jiggle around a little bit. So I actually feel like this, coupled up with the size and weight, it feels like a better quality camera to me. And I don't know, Peter's behind the camera, maybe he can chime in. He also works at a camera store, so he sees a lot of stuff here. What do you think, if anything, about the build quality?
It's pretty sweet for a crop sensor.
It's pretty sweet for a crop sensor. All right, so, I mean, really, I had a couple questions asked about, you know, whether or not this stuff wears off, and my answer is it's no. I mean, it hasn't for me, and if you have any of the XT lines, it's the same. So if you have an XT4 or an XT3 or something like that, and you've had some problems with the stuff rubbing off, it might on this camera as well. However, neither of mine have had any wear like that thus far. So I don't see any issue here with the quality. Some people have also commented that they thought that it was cheaply made. Maybe this was because of some issues like cost savings. For example, this camera, which in my opinion should not be your first Fujifilm camera unless you're coming from another brand and have quite a bit of knowledge, advanced knowledge of the codecs and things like that. It does not come with a battery charger, but you can charge it by plugging it in USB right here. So that's one thing that somebody raised as a flag saying that it was cheap, but in my opinion, that's just how life is these days. I mean, we can't take the camera or the battery out of our phones, right? We can't take, unless you buy, like, so for example, my drone as well. I bought the Fly More kit, so it has a caddy that you can put the batteries in, but if you don't, you have to plug the drone directly into the wall, and that's kind of just the world we live in. So I don't really think that that's necessarily cheap or a cost-saving measure, in my opinion, but some people's definition of quality differs. But I think that this is a really solid camera, and there are no problems with the build quality in general, especially when you compare it to the XT4. So, I mean, again, like I said, all this, it feels the same. The rubbery stuff feels the same. This fake leather stuff, it all feels the same. The coatings are the same. The only difference is you don't have the top dials, which a lot of people didn't like that either. I personally don't care because, again, I was coming from a different system. I came from Canon, and they didn't have top dials to begin with. They had a PASM dial just like this one and a screen on the R5. I didn't have an R5. I did have an R that had a screen like this, and the X-H1 also had a screen like this, and it had 2 dials, so it's just missing 1 dial. So it really, to me, as far as aesthetic, I think, even though they've made the adjustments to the top, it still carries over the Fujifilm aesthetic. I don't know, but what do you think, Peter? It still looks like a Fujifilm camera, right?
Looks like a mini GFX.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, the GFX, exactly. The GFX looks like this, and it has the virtual dials in there. So to go as far as say they lost their soul, I think is a bit extreme, because you have to remember this is a business for Fujifilm, and they have a smaller market share. So what they want to do is make something that's more familiar for people coming from other systems, so that they can be taken seriously by those other people that use other systems, like Canon, like myself. They pick this camera up, it's extremely familiar. They can configure it the same way that they've configured Canons or Sonys, and they're off to the races. And in order to capture that kind of market, they have to do stuff like that. So you can't really blame them. And then the more market they capture, the easier it is for them to continue making niche cameras like this that are more of the retro look. They have come out and publicly said that the XT5 and the XT line, as well as the XE line and the X Pro line, will all retain this sort of classic retro look. So if outward appearances are something that you really care about, keep that in mind, that they will continue to produce these. So they haven't really lost their soul, I guess. For lack of a better phrase, I think that this is just a different design that was meant to help other people adapt to switching to Fuji, along with having a lot of familiar codecs and things that you would find in other higher end cameras. All right, so the second thing I'm going to address is the IBIS. Now, this is a mixed bag of monkeys for everybody, I think, because a lot of people will expect the IBIS, which is really good in this camera, to be perfectly gimbal stabilized, which that is never going to happen. I mean, there's a limited amount of space for the sensor to move in here, and yes, some are better than others. The reason I think that like Olympus is the king of it is because the sensor's so small and there's more room for a larger stabilizer, and that's why iPhones are the same. I mean, the sensors are so tiny, like, you know, that it's a lot easier to stabilize. And with like phones and GoPros these days, they have digital stabilization built in, and some people don't even know that they're using it. And then a lot of times when you see GoPro footage on YouTube, not only is it digitally stabilized, but they run it through like, what's it called? The software is called Real Steady? Is that what it's called? it comes with the GoPro as part of the GoPro suite, and it helps it make it even more stable. And so if you're watching on YouTube, you may not even know that they've done that, but still, you could do the same thing here. And while it does look a lot more jerky, that is because there's a stacked sensor in here. The readout speed of the sensor is so fast that it counteracts some of the wobbles that you would normally get in the X-T4. Now this one, I didn't really care for it. The stabilization looks okay, but if you look in the corners right here, you would notice that there's a lot of warpy wobblies, and to me, I didn't like it. It looked like I was trying to come through your computer screen from a different dimension, and it was extremely hard to stabilize. If you tried like a warp stabilizer on a Premiere or Davinci or something like that, you would start to see that it crops the video in a very funny way. It makes it very hard to stabilize. This one, with the stacked sensor, being that it's more linear and it's not as warpy, it's a lot easier to stabilize in post. So I personally don't do it because I don't really care that much, especially for vlogs. Now, some things I will stabilize if I'm trying to be more cinematic, and I will also be more, careful in my movements like this, at least the best that I can. Or at the end of the day, you know what, gimbals are cheap. I have a Weeble S that you can get now for around $249. Or did you guys sell the Weeble S, Peter?
No.
Okay, because I can't remember how much it is, but they've got the Weeble S and the Weeble 2, now the Weeble 3, so a lot of them are cheap now. And if you really want super stable footage, there is no substitute for it than a gimbal. I mean, but just if you want really stable footage, get a gimbal, use it, you'll be happy. End of story. Now, for me, I think it's okay. It works all right, and if you're going to do a lot of stuff handheld, I think it is a lot more natural looking to me to have it a little bit more jerky than the warps, but that's subjective. That's why I said it's a mixed barrel of monkeys, because you just really don't know what kind of monkey is going to jump out, or it's completely subjective. So with that regard, take with that what you will, because it's a very subjective thing. Look at some sample footage, decide what you want. But at the end of the day, still, I don't think it matters what camera you have. If you want stable footage, spend the money, get the gimbal. The next thing I want to talk about is image quality. So a lot of people have said that on the X-H2s, they're noticing when they upload images, and I'm not sure that's kind of an ambiguous term, whether they're uploading from the card to their computer or they're uploading to like Instagram. If they're going off their computer somewhere else, that's completely a different story. But a lot of people have said that the images look murky or muddy or not as sharp, and I haven't seen that one bit. So what I just did is I took two pictures, one with the X-T4 and one with the X-H2s of the ocean, and I'm gonna make them available for you to download and judge on your own. To me, they look the same, and I haven't noticed really any difference. I mean, the sensor is nearly identical except for the fact that it's stacked. So there shouldn't be too much of an image quality difference, especially with the faster readout speed. It should be able to capture, much faster speeds, especially shooting directly into things like the sunlight. But other than that, they should be pretty much the same. Now, I don't know if that's just because maybe they've gotten a bad batch, because I tend to notice, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I've noticed that a lot of people that are saying these things about the camera got the camera 3 or 4 weeks after mine, so I'm not sure if there's like a bad batch or something like that. It's totally possible. I know that Canon one point had a batch of R6s that had some focus problems, but they were all warrantied out and fixed, so that could be it perhaps, or maybe it's a personal editing style, or the cards they're using. I don't know if they're recording to the CF Express Type B cards and then doing it, or what. I tend to take all my photos on an SD card, and then all my video go to the CF Express Type B card. So that could be an issue. I haven't really taken any pictures on the CF Express Type B, and I haven't noticed any issues with the photos anyway, and I don't intend to do that unless I forget my SD card for some reason. But anyway, I've given the 2 photos of the beach. This is seen right here, and you can download them. I'll probably put them in a public Dropbox links or something like that, so that you can just download them, edit them, export them as JPEG, and judge it for yourself. So now I'm just going to sum this up with the X-H2s versus an X-H2. I don't know, really this is a very subjective thing. It just depends on you and your personal style. I personally went with the X-H2s because it's more data intensive, meaning that the codecs for video tend to grab a lot more data from a scene. So, like, I don't know, there's a lot more detail in the shadows, and it has F-Log2, which is the ability to go up to 14.7 stops of dynamic range, which is great for video, which is something that I'm doing a lot more of now than I used to. So it made more sense for me to get a lot of data and practice editing video and do better videos than to wait for the X-H2 and have the higher resolution. So the X-H2 is going to be an 8K 30 camera. It is also going to do 6.2K just like the X-H2s. However, the frame rates are going to differ a little bit. It's going to do 6K 30, 8K 30, 4K, I think 60, and then it's not going to have any 4K 120, which is another reason I wanted to do this, because I like to have the ability to do slow-mo and regular in the same timeline without having to upscale any clips. So that was another reason for choosing this camera over the X-H2. The X-H2 seems like a great camera, but it's strictly a personal preference. So if you're a resolution person, go for that, as well as stills. So the stills are going to be 40 megapixels. This is only 26.2, I think, 26.1, which was fine with me because I had the X-T4, and the X-T4 was a great camera image-wise for me, and I personally prefer a lower pixel density to a higher one because it makes it, for me personally, easier to edit photos, especially when I'm removing like trees or telephone poles. Having the larger pixels and a bigger area for, say, a Photoshop healing brush tool to sample from makes it easier for me. Some people might be the opposite. They might like a higher pixel density and they just want to zoom in really, really big and use a small, like 1 pixel size brush to do their edits. I would rather save time, but that's just me. So really the main differences are the higher resolution, and that's really it. Aside from the 4K 120 and the ability to output RAW in the X-H2s. I don't really need that right now. I may someday, so keep that in mind. If you're somebody who does want RAW, I don't believe that the X-H2 is going to be able to output RAW to a recorder, just the all-I codecs. Or maybe Apple ProRes, because it is going to have Apple ProRes codecs, but they are going to be at a lower data rate than the X-H2, so they're not going to be sucking in as much data, and they're not going to be in F-Log2. So with that said, that's why I chose this one personally, but it's a very subjective thing. So if you're somebody who's into, say, nature or birding, I would probably go with the X-H2, because having the higher 8K resolution as well as the higher stills, you're gonna, when you zoom in, you're gonna get a lot more detail out of like a bird's face or a giraffe or something on a safari. So it might make a lot of sense for you. For me, I do a lot of edits. I do a lot of edits to my stills and my video. So having the more data is better for me. But by now you've probably read the announcement and made up your own mind, and maybe this video will help you understand, wow, that dog is really loud. Maybe this video will help you understand that at least in the same body, you're going to be getting the same screen, the same body, the same dials, and you can, again, you can link in the description, you'll see my 1 month review of this, so you can make up your mind on some of the things like that. I go over like how easy it is to switch by using these function buttons, because there's no hard switch to switch between movie and stills anymore. So programming these buttons and some of the different things that I thought were a problem at first, which aren't anymore after I learned that you could map the buttons. So those are going to be synonymous between the two cameras. So if that helps you understand what you're getting into, then thanks. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if it doesn't. All right, so now I'm walking back to the car and got Peter here with me. I'm gonna get some of his opinions. Sorry if the audio quality is low. I'm recording here, but I don't have the receiver up there, so I'm just gonna have to transfer it over. No, that's all right, it's already there. We'll take it off in a second. But okay. Anyway, so we're walking and talking. I'm on the X-H2s now. Peter was nice enough to film with the R3, which is a very similar camera, only bigger, right?
Bigger is better.
They're both stacked. And what's that, 20, 30, some 24 megapixels. So this one actually has a higher count. But then again, like I was saying earlier in the video, the pixel density on this camera is going to be higher because the sensor is smaller. Anyway, what do you think about this camera and the X-H2 potential? Or what would you, as a camera store employee, what would you, why would you steer one person to one or the other?
I mean, well, the H2s I know does 40 frames per second. That's more than this guy. And this is twice the amount of money. size-wise, you can hold that a lot easier than this.
Yeah, it travels well.
So that's kind of cool. Fuji colors, I mean, nothing can beat Fuji colors.
Yeah, but XH2 versus XH2s, what would you what do you think is a cutoff for a particular customer?
Probably where they're doing landscape or versus everyday things. So the more megapixel, the better for bigger prints or better cropping.
For like studio portrait photographers, controlled lighting,
Oh yeah, for sure,
you'd think the XH2 is better than the XH2s. Even though the XH2s is geared as a hybrid camera, it is a more video-centric model than the XH2. The XH2 is more still-centric, but yet it has 8K. So do you have a lot of customers that come in wanting 8K?
Most people don't even know what 4K is.
They don't know what 4K is? Yeah, that's probably right. And to be honest with you, I don't actually really like the look of 4K all that much. I don't think it looks bad, but I have noticed that in a lot of the stuff that I do, especially if I'm at the ocean at night and there's light reflecting off of the waves, I noticed that the higher resolution stuff, I did one in 6.2K on here, and it just looked hyper realistic to me. It looked like something out of the Unreal Engine or a video game. And so with the X-H2s, I tend to soften stuff up, put Gaussian blurs, or introduce a little bit of grain or some film damage to make it look a little bit older and grade it a little bit heavier. And for people who are wanting to get more creative with their video, I think that the X-H2 is probably the right answer. And so for people that aren't, they just want to shoot video, get nice, crisp, clear, high res, maybe doing birds and things like that, then yeah, absolutely the X-H2 I think would be the right one for you over the S.